What's going on, guys? In today's video we are going to be adding something to the Durango, something that all cars should come with, the supercharger. Alright, so getting into it, like I said, we're adding a supercharger. I think all cars should come with these. And the 3.6 Pentastar is a total dog. I don't care what anybody says. If you guys got one, you know that. I don't care if you have a 21 speed transmission. It is just slow, has no power, and we're going to add to that. Now, I did pick up a used kit that I got a really good deal on. The downside of that, it was for a Wrangler, and before you say, well, that's the same engine, if it is, but they have a whole different intake, so a lot of parts I cannot use. That said, I'll show you the differences. We'll get into it. We're going to have to do a full custom build. Alright, so popping hood is the first thing we're going to do right now. Don't pay attention to the fact that you do see a charger sitting there. I had to go ahead and mock it up because we couldn't use the original bracket. So I wanted to make sure this was even possible to do before I started making a video series on this thing. It should be possible. Anything's possible if you want it done. But we got to the point now where it's mounted and it spins, so that's all that really matters. However, we're not even there yet. Don't even pay attention to that. We'll get into a little bit of that later on. The first thing that we need to do is we need to start taking things apart because there is two different kits. There is a supercharger kit from Procharger that is for the Wrangler, which is what we bought. However, because the intake to the engine on a Wrangler comes on this side, your throttle body's over here, so your placement of the supercharger is in a whole different area. Whereas obviously you can see the Durango and the Grand Cherokee are on this side. And so I couldn't use the Procharger bracket because it would be in the way it would hit this. And RIP makes a supercharger kit, but their bracket doesn't fit a Procharger, so I was forced to have to make one on my own. But that said, like I said, we'll get into that stuff. For now, we need to go ahead and move forward and start taking apart some of the body. And the first thing that we need to take off is the front bumper and the grille assembly, so let's get to it. Okay, and to take off the front bumper, we have a few different clips we need to remove. Basically, we got to remove some of the clips right here to get the upper part of the grille loose, and then moving down to the sides. We have to separate this complete fender flare here, and to do that, we have some clips here and a couple bolts. And then when we get to the bottom of that, you'll be able to see, at least for me, I have bolts all the way around this. Sometimes you'll have hard rivets that'll have to be drilled out, but basically they go all the way across the front of the bumper. So let me remove all that, get this bumper loose, and we'll pull the shell off. Okay, so I have a whole bag of bolts and obviously labeled and put into a bag that says front bumper so we don't get those misplaced. Now with everything out, we should be able to pull this thing straight out. As you see, I've already separated the fender flare here. You got to be careful, these clips break easy, but you're just going to get your hand behind there. This should pull right out, as well as underneath the headlight, just like so. You'll see everything separated there. We will do the same thing over here. Now be careful, if you're worried about this thing flopping over, make sure you put down some cardboard. I don't have to worry about that, but if for some reason you do, you want to put down that cardboard just to make sure your bumper doesn't get all scratched up. But put my knee in here to block it and separate it like so. We should have some wiring harnesses as well to disconnect. We do on this side over here. I'm going to go ahead and disconnect all that, and then I will show you what it looks like underneath. Alright, of course, what would a video be without a little bit of rain and thunderstorms, because that's what it does around where I live. Anyways, moving forward, you can see there's the front of the vehicle. Now, this vehicle was in a front-end collision at some point, and you can kind of see that by looking at the radiator condenser right there. You see it's kind of bent, twisted a little bit. And I can tell at some point there was a leak right here because you can see where it's kind of damp. So I'll worry about that at another point. However, we do have a front mount radiator, intercooler that's going to be going right here, so we have to kind of keep that in mind. I just kind of want to show you guys what this thing looks like once everything is taken off, and that's basically it. It's pretty straightforward, and so that said, it's time to move forward. Alright, and so now is where my debate starts. Now, because we're running such low PSI, 7 and below, we actually don't need an intercooler, though it is always advised to use one because you can turn the timing up a little bit more and get more boost and power out of it. I'm not necessarily looking for a hot rod, I just want this thing to be able to get out of its own way. So what we're looking at right now is our intercooler, and that actually, again, is from a Wrangler, which is usable. What I have to do to make this work, though, there's going to be some modifications, which we would have to even if we bought the kit for it anyways. The bracket that you see it sitting on, that either has to be cut or removed. That's normally what the bumper kind of lays on somewhat. And then obviously the horns need to be removed. These two brackets right here have to be removed. And then our outer plastics have to be removed because the intercooler piping would be coming through there. And obviously they can't stay. So I don't mind any of that stuff with the exception of those two support bars. Now, maybe they're not really needed. The part that I have a problem with is that's what supports if this hood slams down. And I don't really want everything jumping up and down. So that's something that I do have to think about. I don't necessarily mind doing it. But what I want to do right now is move forward and start getting the engine to the point where it's at right now. Now, hopefully I saved some of these pictures and I will post them if I did, but this is really simple to get this engine to this point. The first thing you're going to have to do is take off, obviously, the engine cover. You're going to have a bolt underneath the very center after you pull the cap off. Then you'll have 4 different prongs, which you'll basically pull this whole thing up. That thing gets pulled out. Now you're seeing the actual engine itself. And you're going to have to remove the intake. Very first thing. This is really simple. You'll have a flathead screwdriver holding the clamp on right here. You'll have 2 clips to unclip right here. You're going to slide this part up and back. And then you should be able to lift the entire thing up and pop it off. You'll have a clip right here it clips into here. And then there was one somewhere up here in the front somewhere that it clips into, but that whole thing will move out of the way. After you have that out of the way, you have a plug that is this right here that goes right here, and one more plug to take out, and you'll be pretty much open. At that point, the only thing that you really have to do is remove our little pump, the air pump or whatever it was that was sitting right here. They're the 2 bolts that go right here. I believe they are 16 millimeter. That'll pop off, and then you'll have a coolant line you'll pop off, and a plug, and that'll basically set right out of the way. Now, what you see right here is just a temporary plug that I have stopping antifreeze from coming out. Then also right here, I stuck a temporary tube. This is just one of these. It doesn't really go there, but it's just stopping it from leaking. We could drain radiator fluid. I decided not to do that yet because, again, I wanted to mock everything up to see how it fit. But that's all you have to do to get to the point I'm at right now, and it's time to move forward. Alright, so I kind of decided since I already have the intercooler, why not go ahead and put it on? It's not that much more work. Honestly, it's just running some piping and making some custom cuts if we have to, because I assume a lot of the tubing from the Wrangler won't fit. Some of it probably will, but some of it may not, and I have plenty extra, so we'll go ahead and use the extra that I have laying around. But that said, I went ahead and pulled out these side pieces to make sure that those pieces would fit through it, and they do like they should. I'm going to go ahead and move these now. Again, I'm going to take off these 2 brackets here, and I'm going to go ahead and cut where you see the blue tape line right here with the Sawzall. I assume that this piece is a really thin piece of plastic. It's probably fairly inexpensive if I have to replace that and decide not to use the intercooler, but since we are deciding to use it as of right now, I'll go ahead and make that cut, and that should clear about everything out of the way for us to go ahead and start making some custom mounting brackets for the intercooler. Alright, and so as you can see, the intercooler is literally just kind of hanging there. Probably not safely, but it is. Obviously, it does have to come up like another 4 inches or so it's not going to stay right there. It needs to come up. But the more I thought about it, I wanted to address a concern about the safety braces being removed. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to utilize those same bolts where that mounted to, and I'm going to mount my radiator to all 4 of those positions, essentially making the intercooler the core support for the front end or part of it. So that should actually turn out pretty well, assuming I make the brackets beefy enough, which I plan to do. So with that said, let's get into it and make some right now. Alright, and so there is our intercooler fully installed with all 4 brackets, and I gotta tell you, it's on there like, I can literally, you won't be able to tell, but I can pick the car up with this thing. It ain't coming off unless another car hits it, so it's on there forever. With that said, it's time to get a coat of black on it because this is not a race car and I don't want to see it. Alright, and there it is in a satin black. Now, while it is still wet, it's still showing kind of a gloss, so that will fade away. But for now, we're going to hold on the intercooler front. We're not going to do any piping yet. We got work to do to the engine. Alright, so one of the first things that we need to do is grab a breaker bar with a 3/8 inch end. We're going to go ahead and stick it inside the tensioner right there. We're going to remove this belt. All we have to do is pull it this way, and that belt will slide right off. Okay, and with the belt now off, we're going to go ahead and remove the factory tensioner right there. Okay, and now with the tensioner gone, we have a pretty clean slate to work with there. However, we'll come back to that area. Now we need to jump forward a little bit. It's time to take off the manifold right here because we got to get in our new ejectors. Alright guys, so for the next step, if you haven't done it already like we talked earlier, go ahead and remove your vacuum pump. To do that, it's really easy. You got 2 bolts that come in right here, you got a wire harness that comes right here, and then you have a vacuum hose that'll pop right off the front, and you can slide that thing right out of the way. Alright, so the first step of getting the upper intake plenum off is go ahead and taking the electrical clips that you'll see right here so we can loosen this area. And then we've got a bunch of these bolts that have to come out, as you'll see. We'll go ahead and pull those out, and that should loosen most of it. Alright guys, so word of wisdom, when you're taking the far back bolt out here, make sure you're careful not to drop it because you won't find it again, and you obviously don't want it going down into the engine. With that said, after all those bolts are out, you should be getting pretty close. You do have to take off the throttle body with 4 bolts right there, which are 8 millimeters, and then a bunch of 10 millimeter bolts here to remove this unit right here. You'll find this part gets loose, and then we have two more 10 millimeter bolts back here, and this entire intake manifold should lift up and off. Alright, with all the nuts and bolts out, you got one more thing to take out, and that is the rear vacuum line. It's got 2 grease tabs, as you can see right here. There's one on the top, one on the bottom. Simply push those together, and you're going to wiggle that off just like so. Alright, 2 things to point out. First, make sure you get that PCV all the way out of this unit right here, because if you don't, you're going to end up busting the end of it off, then you end up just replacing it. So just make sure you're careful getting that out. Second, the instruction manuals, well, all of them, none of them, showed you taking this thing off, but obviously you have to because it's connected. So all you got to do is pop that off, pop this piece off. There's an electrical connector there, and you should be good to go to get this whole thing off. Edit in this one too. Who knew? All right, with the intake manifold out of the way, it's time to go ahead and get started removing some of the injectors. Now, the first thing you want to do before doing anything is make sure you cover up or tape up your intake down here. You don't want nothing falling in there because, well, it's kind of the end. So that said, what I did, I just take a couple rags and I get them wet and lay them over top. Not soaking wet where they're dripping, just damp so they hold in place. You can stuff them right in the hole if you want, as long as they're big enough where you won't forget them or you won't see them. So I like neon colors and I like to lay things over top of it so you can't miss it. That said, it is time to move forward and get these things out. Alright guys, so to get the injectors out, as you see right here, essentially what you're going to do is you're going to tape a pry tool and you're going to pry up some spaces on here, and you're going to get this electrical rail up just enough so it clears these injectors. And then this is actual rail here. You have 3 8mm bolts that you're going to pull out, and once those are out, you should be able to very gently pry this out and all the tops should pop right up. And for the record, to actually remove the plug from the injector, simply pull the red tab up like so, push in on the black underneath it, and simply wiggle off, and there you go. Alright, and I almost didn't even notice with the towels laying over top of it, you actually have 2 T30 Torx bits that have to come out right here, or Torx screws. Once that comes out, you should be able to lift this out. Now, keep in mind, I assume you guys were smart enough to disconnect your negative battery cable before you started all that stuff, but regardless, even if you didn't, you want to make sure that this thing's probably sat for a while so all that fuel pressure is relieved, because if you just jump right into this, you might have fuel pressure in the rail, and that's obviously not good. Alright, and as you can see, I have 3 of the injectors out, 2 of which left the lower O-ring, and 3 of which left the upper O-ring. Now, the upper O-ring fell out and was just laying on the side. I had to use some pinching tool to get hold of those. This is where it's really important to cover your lower intake manifold to make sure nothing gets in your engine. That said, if you look at the intake holes or the injector holes, I got some cleaning to do. So I'm going to go ahead and clean those, and then we'll throw in our new injectors. Alright, so with all those cleaned out, here are the new injectors that came with my kit. If you can look at the numbers there, that's what they are, or so I believe. It's the box that came in, and here are the injectors. So I'm going to go ahead and throw all 3 of these on this side in. I'll get the other side in and we'll close it up. Also, here's a close-up of the numbers. The old one, original one, being on top with the green dot. You can see its number there, and the new one below it, there's its number. Again, I don't know if that helps you guys if you guys are looking for these, but whatever they are, that's what it came with. Alright, and my injectors are all back in now, all replaced and ready to go. I do stand corrected one thing though. These 2 8mm bolts I was telling you to take out, that's actually to the lower intake manifold. Those don't have to come out. The only thing you actually have to take out is the 2 upper hex ones. So, I guess you can't be right on everything. Alright guys, so with our injectors now done and our intake manifold still off, it's time to go ahead and work with our spark plugs. Now, I'll probably end up replacing them, but I'm going to go ahead and check them, and at very least they're going to get regapped to 0.032. Now, you do have the option as well to change the coil packs. I don't personally think it's necessary, but the company RIP does offer a set. They're like $300 some odd, especially if you're at the point where yours are a little bit old, maybe it's a good time to replace them. It might be a good idea to get an upgraded set, but I don't know that there's that much of a performance difference. That said, let's go ahead and pull these things out and see what our plugs look like. So the first plug is now out, and just FYI, to get these things out is really simple. Simply take a flathead screwdriver and pry the clear part right here back, little tab, and then just simply pinch the tab up and pull back and it'll come off. You got a 10mm bolt that'll unscrew like you see that one there, and just gently kind of wiggle back and forth and pull the whole coil out. Once you get it out, you need a 5/8 inch socket, and then you get your plug, which is this plug here. Now, I don't know if these Champions are the OEM ones or not. Overall, they look pretty clean. They're brown like they should be, the way you would expect a good running engine to be. The new ones that I will be using will have to be gapped. This current gap is at about a 0.45 right here, which is all too high. So we're going to actually have to bring that down by pushing this outer electrode down. You do not want, on any kind of modern spark plug, to use the spark plug gapper tool against this metal tip right here. If you touch that little tiny diode right there, you're going to take the metal off it and it's not going to work well. So it's very important when you push this thing down that when you grab your little tool right here and you slide it between, that you're pulling up on this piece and not touching that little diode right there. Very important. But again, the gap on these is going to be 0.032 on the new ones. I'm going to go grab those and we'll throw those things in real quick. Alright guys, so I'm about to show you the magic of this build, and for those of you that may have been watching but not really paying attention but are wanting to do this project, I highly suggest you pay attention right now. The most important thing is getting this charger to sit in that spot where it is supposed to, and there was a lot of work and drilling, as you can see, done to get this to fit. Now what I used was a 3/8 inch thick aluminum plate. You guys can use whatever you want, but I'm going to give you the numbers for what it needs to be. This plate again is 3/8 inches thick. The bolts that I used to hold it in were two here, and I have two I haven't put in yet that goes here and here. So there'd be 3 bolts on each upper plate, and you'll see there's 2 bolts on the lower plate. Now these here, these are tensioners, and I'm going to put a link in the description below, but it's not a normal tensioner. You see, Rip sells ones like these, and they're like 160 bucks. These are like $16. And actually what these are chain rollers for a motorcycle by All Balls. I'll give you guys, again, the link in the description below, or for anything that I think is necessary for this build. But these should work. They are dual bearing. They are perfect size, and they roll really well, and they are the perfect width as the pulley right here. So these are working great. A little more dimensions. There's 19 millimeters from the plate to the bottom of this roller. That's going to line you perfect with this pulley right here. So keep that in mind. This is lower. It doesn't have to be. It could be put up here, but I think it'll fit better lower. I may change that. We'll find out. And again, this one I reused the existing bolt, but a little bit longer one to utilize this space right here. So it's got to be above where the charger sits. So the bottom of the charger, this has to be above. If it's not, it will not clear the water pump pulley, or whatever that is. So it's got to be up higher. Now, there will be another hole that's drilled right here you guys don't see yet, and the reason why, there's going to be a C-shaped bracket that bolts the bottom half of it to that hole right there. That was the original tensioner, I'm sorry, not the tensioner, but the original pulley hole right there. So keep that in mind, very important, because not only are we going to support the top, we want to support the bottom. But again, take a look at what I'm working with right here. This is what I came up with, and so far it's a perfect fit. Alright, so now that the charger is removed and it's ready to go back and be installed, before we can put it in, we have to modify this coolant tube that you see right here because it's in the way. It used to run all through here and obviously can't go there now. So what we're going to use, we're going to cut this thing up. We're going to use a couple pieces of it, but then we're going to use some soft tubing to reroute around this thing. But before we can do that, we have to drain the coolant. And I'm not going to make a mess. A lot of people just go ahead and open up this valve and let it pour over. There's actually a nipple on the bottom of that thing where you can run a hose through. I'm going to run to the bottom here. We'll drain the coolant, and then we'll get this thing modified. Okay, so in regards to the coolant line, I wasn't 100% sure how it was going to run. Some people were doing soft lines and they were running them underneath, but because I have pulleys now underneath, I don't really like that idea. So I'm thinking about running them lower and attaching them with these bolt holes, which you can only see right there on our main mounting plate, to keep it away from everything, just assuming that our intercooler piping is going to clear that. So I might go ahead and run it now, or I might wait, I don't know. But what I did do was put on the serpentine belt. Now what that belt ended up being was a 79-inch 6-rib. So for me, I bought a Duralast part. That part number is 790K6. You guys might find better belts, probably from Gates or other names like that. But this one will temporarily work now. I know it was a 79. You might get away with a 78. So if for some reason it starts getting some belt slip, we'll move back to a 78. But 78 is going to be kind of tight. So again, right now we're going to move forward with that 79. Again, 790K6. Alright, so I went ahead and put on this side of the intercooler piping. Now, I've got it actually to fit pretty darn good. I did use a different sleeve. I didn't have to, but I have a couple extra sleeves. And in fact, I bought a whole intercooler kit, a 2.5-inch piping kit. I'm hoping not to have to use it because I think I have enough pieces and extra stuff here and there that I can fit that in the right-hand incoming side and really make it work. So overall, it's fitting pretty good. Don't mind the cloth. It feeds in really well. The only thing I don't like is coming around this corner here. You'll see that it's kind of up against this bracket. Now that's soft and it's not sharp, but I still think I'll probably put a piece of maybe aluminum tubing, like intercooler tubing around it, and just kind of clamp around it just to make sure that doesn't harm it, because obviously at some point that will wear through, so we don't want that. But anyways, the whole reason I put this on is I wanted to make sure that I had basically no obstacles running that coolant hose to right there. And fortunately, all the years of messing with jet skis, I got all kinds of different hoses that have 90 and 45 degree fittings. So I should be able, between that and the pipe that it came with, come up with something really nice. So let me throw that together and I'll show you what it looks like. Alright, and we have our crossover tube coolant hose done, and here's what I did. You'll see that thing comes down now and over, right there, and back to where it's supposed to be. Now essentially what I did was I took the coolant, the secondary hose that was coming off of it, actually is coming from right here, and I cut that T-section that was right here and used it over here. And I took a basically a straight section with a 90 degree that's down there and connected a couple hoses to make that work. Now, for the most part, you guys probably won't have these bent hoses that I had, So what you probably have to do is just get some straight tubing. You'll be fine. Just use your 90 degree over here that was over here, and just run it straight out and up right here, and you should be good. You can even use a 90 right here if you really want that bend to be perfect. So far that worked out pretty darn good. It's time to move forward. We got some things to do before we get this top end back together, and the next thing coming up is using our bypass or blow-off valve, or what do they consider that thing? All right, and there you'll see our relief valve slash bypass valve slash blow-off valve, whatever you want to call it. It's all installed and runs right up to this tube you'll see right down here. So it's set up. It's time to go ahead and start finishing installing our intake manifold. Basically, reverse steps is what we took it out with. All right, and so our intake manifold here is back together so far, and everything looks pretty good. Everything's really clean. We got a throttle body back on, and then we have our T-fitting. Now this one came with the system. It's a little too beefy in my personal opinion. It may not stay, honestly. If this blocks the engine cover from coming back down on it, that's going to go, and I'm going to use what I would have basically used at the starting, which was this part was cut off from right here. I just get a half-inch to a quarter-inch T that goes inside there, put this back down, and run this down to your bypass valve. Pretty straightforward, pretty easy. It's time to move forward. We have a couple other mods to do. Okay, and so next part is to install our aftermarket map sensor, which you'll see right here. We're going to replace the original map sensor right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to unplug this clip right here. Now this doesn't just pry out, you actually have to turn this. Make sure you turn it until it wiggles. And there is our original. I apologize, my hands are filthy. Our new one is going to slide in place. And I don't know 100% for sure exactly how I'm going to mount this yet, because it's probably different from what the Wrangler was. So let me kind of figure that out, and I'll be right back. Alright, so for right now, this is how I have it installed. It's not staying this way. You'll see this bracket right here. That's from the Wrangler, and that's actually meant to go over this piece right here to stop this thing from moving. Clearly, that's not going to fit. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to 3D print and design a piece to go right there, and I'll show it to you here in a second. And there is our 3D printed bracket. It's strong. It does not move at all. I'll put the link in the description below. Alright, and moving forward, I've lucked out. I ended up not having to use the $100 intercooler tubing kit that we had purchased, and I was able to use some extra piping and coolant hose and tube that I already had with the solid fitment. I went ahead and put a bracket, you'll see right back there. And the one last thing I need to do is our IAT sensor, which used to be way up here, is now way down here. So I'm going to have to go ahead and extend these two wires right here. Let me get that done. Alright guys, so it was as simple as that. All I really had to do was I had to use waterproof shrink tubing to get the new connectors on with extended wire, and rewrapped it in industrial automotive tape. You'll see it runs from here, back up here, through right here, down, and to the sensor where it's supposed to be. So that was really easy. Time to move forward. Alright, so moving forward, we only have a few things left to do. One of those things is this air pump right here. So what I'm going to be doing is installing it down in this lower frame rail that you see down here. It's nice because actually the air tube that goes to it runs right to that spot, and it's pretty well out of the way. I'm going to have to take this pipe back out real quick just temporarily to get this thing in, but once we get it in, it'll be good. Now I do have to extend the wires because you'll see that the harness has to come from here way down there. So we got about a 2.5 foot extension that has to come on these wires. I'm not going to cut the harness, I'm going to cut the actual pump because the pump's obviously replaceable, the harness not so much. So let me get that done, and again I'll show you what it looks like. Alright guys, to show you how we're going to be mounting this thing, I had to drill 2 holes. So you can kind of see I drilled one already right there. I went ahead and marked one right there. I essentially set it where I wanted it and used a permanent marker to mark on the spot where I needed the holes to be. And now what I'm going to be doing is putting a rib nut in each one of those locations so we have something to bolt to. I didn't want to use like self-tappers or anything because the amount of vibration that one of these pumps have would have knocked it loose. And so I made my own DIY tool of how I hold the rib nuts in. Essentially, it's just a bolt that the rib nuts actually use. Spacer, and then another nut. And what happens is I put a wrench on this nut and I just use the impact to tighten this down, and it flattens this after it goes through the hole and widens it out and holds it in place. So really simple, easy trick. Doesn't cost anything, and it's really, really efficient. Alright, so as you guys can see, it's a pretty much seamless install. If I could critique one thing, the only thing I would say is I made this line a little bit too long, but I was erring on the side of caution because the reason why, I didn't want it to be too short. And it's okay to have extra room to work with rather than having not enough. So, but everything is zipped up almost like OEM. You wouldn't really be able to tell otherwise other than the metal shavings that'll get blown out. So for now we have a couple other things to do. We have to throw a PCV line inside right here, which is a one-way valve, which is a 5/8 or 16 millimeter. I'll put a link in the description for that below as well. It was kind of tough to find. You wouldn't think it would be, but it took me about 3 or 4 hours to actually find it on Amazon, but I got it. So I'll put that link in the description below. And then moving forward, we're going to address something that is a major plague to all these 3.6 liter engines. I kind of pointed it out earlier. And there is a TSB on it, but not a recall, but there should be. And that is this problem right here. And so what happens is there's a big ring around this, or an oil seal. and it just doesn't seal and it blows oil out, and it's very problematic. And all the dealer does is basically take that seal out and throw a new one in, and it does the same crap. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and put some sealant around both. We're basically going to clean it up first. Then we'll take the O-ring out. I'll show you. We'll sealant around it, let it sit for 24 hours, and that thing should be solid. It shouldn't leak a drop of oil after that, but that's what should be being done at the dealerships. Not that I have any room to talk for the dealership, but if I had to, that's what I'd say. So let me go ahead and do that. I'll show you what it looks like.
Alright, and so guys, there it is back in. As you can see, as you push it in, it pushes the excess sealant out. I just wiped it around with my fingers to give it kind of a smooth edge. It's not perfect, but I assure you that it won't leak any more oil. And especially you want to fix this thing, because once you stick boost in this engine, it's going to be a whole different world of monster of oil leak. And, well, you guys can read forums on kind of how that works, but nonetheless, I think it's 100% fixed compared to what it was. We'll see in the future, but for now, that part's done.
Alright, and moving forward for the PCV, we're going to go ahead and take some PCV cutter, and we're going to cut right here to make space for the actual PCV itself. And in goes our PCV valve going this way. Okay, and so moving to one of the final parts of this build, I'm working on the very last part, and that is the air box, or the factory air intake. Now, I'm trying to utilize the factory air intake, and the reason why, well, if you kind of see the fadedness right here, that's because we have an open vent. Which means that if I was to put this type of filter that came off that Wrangler right here, what do you think would happen when it rained? And so common sense tells me that I can't have that, and I'd like to keep the factory box, which sounds kind of crazy. You can do a K&N drop-in, but it is definitely sealed out as far as the hot air coming into it, which is much better in my opinion. And if you get decent flow, I think it'd be just fine with the drop-in filter, but also sealed, not having to worry about any water get into it. Now what I'm working with right here is, this was the 90-degree elbow that came with the Wrangler kit, and again, it came with this arm right here. However, this arm won't work, and we don't need that because that is utilized in the factory air box. So all we really need at this point is an adapter here and a 3.5-inch pipe to come right here. Now, this right here is actually the exhaust port connector for some sort of wave runner, a supercharged wave runner of some sort. I just happened to pick it up from our partners at jetmotorsports.net. Or you can find them on eBay at Jet Motorsports Midwest or Jet Motorsports Northeast, I believe is what it is. Anyhow, they were able to hook me up with this, which is the size I need. However, it is very thick. Because 3.5 inches is kind of an oddball size like this one here, they're kind of hard to find those couplers. However, it will work, and what I'm working with right now, if I continue to use this, as stiff as it is, I need to find a 3.5-inch pipe that will go here to here, which is a slight bend. That's going to be hard. It would be much easier to utilize something like this that came factory. However, that's built into the plastic. It's not just overlapped on it. It's actually built into it. So I can't take that off. So I have to find somehow or another to maintain this 3.5-inch pipe here to here. So I'm going to work on that. I'll be right back. Let's see what I come up with. And finally, after a few different fittings, we got our intake all together and finished up. Alright, now the last thing that we need to do to get this thing complete before we can tune it is send our PCM out to get it unlocked. Now, since you already have your coolant tank released by the two 10mm bolts that were sitting here, it's time to take the PCM out. The PCM is held in by three 8mm bolts. You'll see one here, one down there, and one right there. And there's also a tab right here with the release the whole thing. The problem that you're going to probably run into, just like I am, even on a low mileage new vehicle, is that these units are locked into here. Now, generally what would happen, like much PCM or especially BMW connectors, you'd push a button right here and you'd pull this latch. And what would happen was these teeth right here would actually pull this green right here downward, as well as the blue on this side downward. The problem is what happens is this cover pops off and these are held in place. And so essentially what you have to do is take a flathead screwdriver and push the green from the top and the blue from the top down until it clicks, and this should come off. Now, I will be upfront with you and telling you that this is not easy, and it's a very dangerous game to play. You got to be very careful because obviously you don't want to damage the connector for sure, and you definitely don't want to hurt your PCM. So be careful in doing this, but you'll see you'll be able to wiggle it out from the back once these things come loose. Do not try to pry this, because if you try to pry this, it's just telling you that something's locked on these tabs and you're just going to break it. So make sure you take your time, keep pushing left and right until this thing comes loose, and you should be good to go. And in goes our PCV valve going this way. And finally, after a few different fittings, we got our intake all together and finished up. Alright guys, so I just got my ECU back from HP Tuners, and you guys will notice the same when you guys do this. They'll have tags around this thing to show you that it's from HP Tuners, and if these get split, they will no longer warranty this unit, so make sure you're careful with that. But get everything plugged back in. It's kind of obvious. It's pretty much the opposite of taking it out, duh. So let's go ahead and get a tune in this thing. We can get this thing started, and we'll finish this video. Okay guys, so moving into the card, it's starting to get dark, so bear with me here. The first thing we want to do is we want to take our MPVI 3 and plug it into the OBD port. You'll see that there'll be a light illuminated once it is connected. Let me get in the car real quick and turn off this dinging so it doesn't drive me nuts. All right, and you're going to get your laptop that you're going to have a program called VCM Editor installed. You can download this at HP Tuners website. It'll give you all the instructions on how to install everything. And then obviously at this point, you guys need to find somebody to get you a base tune. Now this doesn't come for HP Tuners, at least not for this particular vehicle. So you will need to find somebody that can do that. Now I have done my own kind of base tune where I've taken another tune and basically turned off auto start stop, speed limit, and a few other things, modified it. And what I'm gonna do now is I have to go ahead and click File. I'm going to go to Open. I'm going to find the tune that I want to tune. So I got a bunch of different ones here. So I will just say that the most recent one will be this one right here. All right, and you'll see once it loads, you'll have a little red icon right here, which is a chip. And what we're going to do here is show that we are going to actually be writing to the vehicle. So again, I'm going to make sure that my ignition is on the run position. It is not running, it's off, but it's in the run position. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the write icon, which you'll see right here. And now what you'll see pop up now is there's right calibration. Now the very top one is going to be for your PCM, this is the engine, and the very bottom one's going to be for your transmission control module. Now if you are writing to your transmission all in one, which you probably should be if you had a good tuner write something for you, you'll want to go ahead and do both at the same time. For me, I already have the transmission written, so I'm going to choose not to write that. I'm going to go ahead and just write the calibration to the TCM for now, or sorry, the PCM for now. So I will click write. Now you do have to have internet connection for this, so this might fight with me. I'm seeing that it's not connected right now. I may have to connect that. If it doesn't connect right now, I will. I'll let you know. Well, it looks like it's doing it, so we should be all right. Oh, it's got internet now. Never mind. All right, so what you'll see here now is your things will start basically resetting, doing a bunch of funky stuff. That's okay. It's supposed to do that. Don't freak out. It's pretty basic. This will take a couple minutes. This essentially will load. You'll see it says remaining 35 seconds. It's going to go through that real quick, and then it's going to ask me to turn the ignition off. Okay, and so that part has finished, and as you see it says turn ignition off and wait 10 seconds. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to turn off the ignition. I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. I'm going to turn the ignition back on to run. I'm going to click OK right here, and I will choose close. All right, and now our system is ready to run. And so what we're going to do here is we're going to turn the ignition back off again, and then I'm going to step on the brake. All right, and there she is running right now. So now I apologize. I know I'm in the dark. I know that the lighting kind of sucks. It is what it is. But you'll see now that it is running. There is some fine tuning to be done. This isn't the first time I've done this. I just wanted to show you guys how I did it. I had to go through a couple good 20 different tunes to get this thing running right, but we finally got it. So now it's good enough to get to the actual dyno tuners at an actual dyno tuning place to get the real power that we need out of it. Alright guys, so it's been about a week and a half. We've been running the Durango back and forth, having a good time with it. We are running a blended fuel mix of about 8 gallons of 88 to about 12 gallons of 93. It seems to be doing really well so far, so I'm glad. I'm happy to say there's a lot more power. The tuning definitely makes a world of difference. So when you guys have a base tune, go get a dyno tune because the amount of difference in performance that you will get out of it will be jaw-dropping. It's definitely a whole different vehicle, so I appreciate you guys watching. Again, if you guys like the content, click that thumbs up, and if you haven't already, click subscribe to see the next content coming out. I'll see you guys in the next one.